in Baringo, Tandare Valley, the Pura Valley, Malaso Escarpment, and all the gorges and caves that were identified. So I think we need to clarify for the public interest, through you, Mr. Speaker, that those orders were not targeting habitual places of public residence. They were targeting specific, remote, and uninhabited areas where bandits could retreat and plan attacks, but then pursuant to the requirement of international law on the use of force, we are to give a notice, because some would ask, why give a notice to bandits to vacate? The target was not on bandits. In fact, we did not expect them to vacate. We did not expect them to vacate because these bandits had grown horns and were full of impunity and theatrics. That notice was intended at the general public. They could be members of their families, women and children, because under international law, if you're going to use force, then you must ensure that that force is targeted at armed criminals or belligerents or people who are resisting authority, and members of the public should have that notice. And I am happy to report, Mr. Speaker, those places are now clear. With regard to the attacks that we continue to experience in those areas, it's as a result of some of the bandits who took the 24-hour window to mix up with the public. We are working very hard to make sure that we also extinguish the remaining threats. And therefore, in a nutshell, the operation, in our view, is a success. We have learned in the last 2 months there are still gaps. We are going to seal the gaps. We will stay there as long as it takes. I want to assure the people of Samburu County and all the other counties affected, including counties affected by this menace, but which are not part of the operation yet. I want to assure them the crime of violent cattle theft, rustling, banditry, and visiting terror on the public by criminals. We will make sure that that culture and that practice is finished and it will be part of the history of Kenya. We are determined to do whatever it takes. It takes a while because of the intricacies involved, but Honorable Speaker, we are on course and we will win the war. It's either Kenya or bandits. It's either the law or crime. One has to give way. Kenya will not give way. The government will not give way. The people of Kenya will not give way. Bandits, criminals, have to give way. Honorable Speaker, with regard to the second part of the question, I would like to respond as follows. The measures that we are taking, other than the military and police action to flush out criminals, includes improving our intelligence so that we work on intelligence based and intelligence-led security. We've made great strides in strengthening multi-agency intelligence sharing, even within the organs of the national security. Within the National Intelligence Service, National Police Service, other agencies that are involved in the security of our country, we are investing heavily on intelligence. And the same way, Mr. Speaker, the enhancement of intelligence-led security has helped us to contain the threat of terrorism. I am convinced beyond doubt that Kenya will win against bandits through intelligence-led security operations. Number two, we have deployed and enhanced the Special Operation Group, which is one of the formed units of the National Police Service. And Mr. Speaker, for the information of the House, the future of our country winning over sophisticated and complex crime, including banditry, terrorism, drug trafficking, the future is in the specialized formed units of the National Police Service. We have a number of these formed units: Special Operations Group, the Rapid Deployment Unit, the Anti-Stock Theft Unit, and others, including the General Service Unit. These are our front-line soldiers in the fight against complex crime. And therefore, with regard to the measures taken in Samburu West, we have deployed in the last few weeks the Special Operation Group, which helped us a great deal 2 months ago to stabilize Samburu North, the area of Baragoi. There were gunshots every day, deaths and bloodshed every day. But the Senator of Samburu and the people of Samburu will tell you from December last year, that area has been cleared. And the challenge we have, Mr. Speaker, and we call upon Parliament, the two houses of Parliament, to support our security sector. The investments required in the specialized training of these formed units is so high, yet the results are extremely precious for this country. The war against terror was won by the formed units, including, of course, the anti-terror police unit. The war on banditry will be won by a mixture of general policing, but also the use of formed units. And therefore, we will require the support of the House. So the way we've done with Baragoi, we are now putting SOG on other parts of Samburu and also on other parts of the affected counties, even those that are not within the operation area. And I can report to the House that on Friday, I'll be visiting Elgeyo Marakwet to see the deployment of SOG because of the Koloa Bridge and the problems we've had in Marakwet East between Tiati and Marakwet. There has been cross-border raids of late. We have sealed off that area now. It's going to be a thing of the past, and so gradually we are winning the war. We'll invest in peace building. Shortly, we are starting a peace engagement, community-led peace engagement and peace building activities in all these areas because we thought we stabilize the areas first before we engage in peace building. We will also do disarmament. But we've taken our time first to stabilize and silence the guns. We must disarm the public. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the nation through this House, every criminal holding firearms illegally must surrender them. They either surrender the firearm or we will take it by all means possible. And therefore, we will have a disarmament plan. We'll have a radicalization plan because just like terrorism, banditry and and cattle rustling has now assumed some radical ideological leanings where the people doing it are no longer doing it for culture. They are not just doing it for money. It's beyond enterprise. It's beyond culture. Increasingly, there is an ideology by those criminals that you can actually harass the public and take their property and kill them and terrorize and look important. And I want to assure the people of Kenya, we will defeat bandits. I don't know how it will take, but we'll defeat them, and banditry will be part of Kenyan history. Mr. Speaker, if we had continued to allow what was happening by the time the Kenya Kwanza administration came to office, and a few months after, if we had left that continue, we would have had serious security agencies, because we feared that even international terrorist networks would have infiltrated some of these groupings and complicated those matters. So, Mr. Speaker, finally, we are investing in long-term rejuvenation of the region which is affected with social amenities, public infrastructure. We are negotiating with our counterparts in the Ministry of Water, Ministry of Roads, Ministry of Energy, so that whatever quota of development projects, whatever development projects that are being launched or being planned are being funded for water, for schools, for hospitals, we are requesting for security reasons to get an enhanced quota, an enhanced package for those areas, so that we open northern part of Kenya, including Samburu, and make sure that these places are also empowered, they are opened up, and I keep on saying, Mr. Speaker, the future of Kenya is in the north. There is land, there are resources, there is potential for investment. If we can silence the guns and make them safe places, the future of Kenya 100 years from now, 200 years from now, is in the north of our country. I have looked at the case studies of different countries. I believe the future of this country is in the almost 3/4 of our country that is facing insecurity. If we can sort out security, that is where the future economic strength of our country will be. The same way California, in the middle of a desert, today is the backbone of the American economy. And many other countries, Australia and other places, where desert territories have been turned into economic anchors for the country. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, what plans do I have for our people in Pura, Malaso, and all the other places that could have been displaced as a result of the orders I issued in Malaso on 12th of March 2023, the vacation orders? What plans do we have to make sure that they are able to normalize their lives and plant their farms? I had intended to visit that area on Friday. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have brought forward that trip to tomorrow, because on Friday I'll be in Elgeyo Marakwet. And I want to apologize to the leaders, because sometimes we give very short notices when we are traveling to your areas. It is not intentional. Unlike my colleagues in other ministries, our ministry is a ministry run on an emergency basis. We cannot plan. Other people plan where we will be. If it is not Paul Mackenzie, it is the bandits, it is other criminals, and you don't know what they are planning and what harm they'll cause where. So every day you wake up, and depending on the security situation of the country, you determine where to rush. And even as I speak, I'm rushing to Busia today, and I had not planned. So I will be visiting, in answer to the question by the senator, I'll be visiting Samburu County tomorrow afternoon to find out if there are genuine cases of people who are displaced. And from there, I'll announce the measures the government of Kenya will make to make sure that nobody who is an innocent member of the public is disrupted from their daily activities, even as we continue securitizing Samburu and Kenya as a whole. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, the Honorable CS of Interior. Honorable CS, I have restrained myself because you are the very first CS to appear before the Senate. However, as you're aware, having served in this Senate, this is a house of rules and procedure. And and our rules, more particularly Standing Order 51C5, a CS wishing to respond to a question must file a written response with the Senate 24 hours before they appear on the floor of the Senate. And when appearing before the Senate, of course, as a CS, you're supposed to read verbatim the response that you filed with us. And thereafter, if you have any supplementary information to the response you've given us, then you can proceed to do so. The design was given so that the senator asking the question has prior knowledge of the kind of response you will give, and therefore prepare himself or herself adequately for a supplementary question. And therefore, Honorable CS, if you appear next before the Senate, kindly we will expect you to first read verbatim the response that you will have filed with the Senate, and thereafter you'll proceed, if need be, to give supplementary information to your response as and when senators ask supplementary questions. But since you're the very first CS to appear before the Senate, I've allowed you to get away with that. Now, Honorable Senators, the CS has given a very comprehensive response, though beyond the filed response that he did. And therefore, I will allow the senator who asked that question, if he has any supplementary question, to ask. And thereafter, I will allow any other senator to ask supplementary question. Now, Senator Lelegwe, you, under standing orders, you have 2 supplementary questions. You may choose to ask them at once, or you may choose to ask one now, allow your colleagues to answer the supplementary questions, then you be the last to ask the very last supplementary question. Kindly proceed, Senator Lelegwe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I confirm that I have received both the electronic and hard copy of the response by the CS. Of course, late, that is today morning, but I appreciate his response, and I'm sure the promises he has made to the Senate to tackle insecurity in security-prone areas, including Samburu, will bear fruit. Mr. Speaker, I choose to ask 2 supplementary questions now, and I proceed with one. Since you made the pronouncement to order the multi-agency operation in the banditry-prone areas, many cases of banditry have occurred in the presence of the multi-agency team, the security forces, without any action taken. And I'm sure the CS has this information, has this intelligence, that cases of banditry, killing of people, loss of livestock, stealing by those bandits, have taken place. And in light of all that, in the presence of the military, in the presence of the multi-agency team, little or no recovery has been reported. Despite the success, and I agree, there is some levels of success since the deployment of these agencies. But the stolen livestock or the arrest of the perpetrators have not taken place. In light of this, CS, what is the government's policy on recovery of stolen property, that is livestock, and compensation if the government is unable to take action? We have seen families having been impoverished.
Honorable Senator, of course, today is the very first time you're doing this, and I'll be giving a lot of latitude to both the CS and the members. But kindly, the supplementary question you ought to ask must be very direct. It is not an opportunity to make a speech, and then after the speech, you pose a question. Direct questions to the CS.
Okay.
Subject matter.
Thank you, Speaker. I proceed. One, since you made the pronouncement and ordered a multi-agency operation in banditry-prone areas, many cases of banditry have occurred in the presence of the security forces without any action taken or recovery of stolen livestock or arrest of the perpetrators. In light of this, what is the government's policy on recovery of stolen property, livestock, and compensation, if any, if the government is unable to take action? Two, what measures do you plan to implement in order to guarantee the safety and security of administrators, in this case the chiefs, operating in areas prone to banditry? Is the CS considering providing them with training and arms to enhance their security? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS, kindly proceed to respond to the two supplementary questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm sorry for veering off the standing orders. I was still in the past. In my previous role as a senator, I am guided. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished senator for Samburu County, I will reply as follows. That it is true that we have had incidents of banditry even after the deployment of the Joint National Police Service and Kenya Defence Forces operation. I've explained why those attacks continue, because of a bit of a mix-up where we could have bandits spread out in villages, and although our officers are on ground, they cannot be deployed to every home. So we are looking for strategies to work around that and make sure that we mop out and finish that problem now that we know where the problem is. Mr. Speaker, we have made tremendous improvement in terms of recoveries of stolen livestock. Before the operation, we had very many livestock stolen which were not being recovered. And we are compiling actually data backwards from August and even the entire of 2022, just to show what this administration has done as compared to previously in terms of recoveries and those kind of action. I am able to report the data we have at the moment is showing marked improvement by this administration in terms of recoveries. We've had recoveries in Laikipia, recoveries in Baringo, recoveries in even in Samburu. And out of the 500 livestock stolen since January, we have recovered 200. 300 are still at large. And the reason is because these criminals, once they steal, they separate the livestock in small groups and disappear. They allocate each other 10, 5, 20, 15. So when you recover, you will hear that 200 goats have been stolen, but it will be shared with 10 each, 20 people, and they go different directions. So when you recover in bits and pieces, and that's part of the reason why we've not had 100% recovery. But again, we are working on how to improve our recovery progress. Finally, the senator has asked about what we are doing to make sure that our officers are trained, the national administration officers are trained and equipped. Right now, pending before the National Security Council is a proposal for a limited issuance of firearms to all chiefs, assistant chiefs, and ACCs in specific areas which are facing harsh insecurities so that they can support the National Police Service in tracking livestock and also protecting themselves from armed criminals, because they are normally the targets. And we have lost a few already. We've lost a chief in Samburu, we've lost one in Laikipia. So we are considering a policy shift to provide firearms and also to give them training so that they can help us better serve the people of Kenya. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable William Cheptumo. And senators, kindly abide by our standing order 51B 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As the honorable senator asks his supplementary question, for those who have queued here, kindly, as you ask your supplementary question, abide by that particular standing order, 51B 3, so that we move. And Senator, precise, concise,
Okay.
very brief.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me a chance to ask some supplementary question. But Mr. CS, around 2016, 2017, your ministry gazetted a number of administrative units in various counties in our country. These created new locations, sub-locations, divisions, and some sub-counties. Up to today, those gazetted units have not been activated or able to operate. This is helping to assist your ministry on matters security, especially in the security areas. When will you do this, Wanawasiri, Mr. CS? When will you operationalize the units gazetted by your ministry in 2016, 2017 in various counties? And my county in Baringo, there are several of them, areas you were able to visit last time.
Honorable CS, 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, sir, all the gazetted administrative units will be operationalized, but due to budgetary constraints, we have decided to operationalize all the already gazetted areas in phases, in 3 phases, starting this financial year. We will have an objective criteria of identifying which of them goes the first phase, second phase, third phase. That objective criteria includes security challenges faced in that area, like banditry, terrorism, and other complex security issues, illicit drugs and alcohol, and then also regional balance, so that some in one region, another in another region. So we'll have a criteria of making sure that we do, starting this June, and that criteria will be made public so that we carry the entire country together. Asante. Thank you.
Senator Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Minister for the CS for a well-detailed response, which has opened other things for all of us. We know him for a thorough person. Mr. Speaker, from those of us who watch from far, I don't know, I want to ask the Minister whether there is a policy of handling people who have been displaced by government for reasons including what happened this time when people were moved from their places, because what we were seeing in the media, people who were really in a very bad situation. Is there a policy where food must be provided, sanitation must be provided? Because if people are told to move and they have not told where to move to and how they are going to live, it becomes tricky. Can the Minister expound on what policy they have on how to handle them when they have left their homes. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in response to the supplementary question asked by the distinguished Senator Margaret Kamar, I would like to respond as follows. That any Kenyan who was displaced as a result of the ongoing security operation or for whatever other reason, the policy of the government of Kenya is to resettle them. As I have said earlier before this House, Mr. Speaker, we have begun tracking whether there are any victims of the orders that I issued in Malaso on 12th of March 2023, starting with Samburu tomorrow, and all the other counties will assess if there are any genuine people who are displaced as a result of those orders. The government of Kenya will facilitate either their return or their settlement so that no Kenyan is deprived of their property or deprived or removed from their habitual places of residence. I thank you.
Senator Kathuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for your indulgence. Honorable Speaker, my question is very indirect and almost similar to what has been asked, because I agree that the future of Kenya is the north, but that is the future. So I'm asking, what immediate measures is the ministry taking to make sure that that area is considered in a very special way, so that that custom of banditry can stop, so that they can start farming and doing other things? What immediate measures is the government taking besides militarization of the region? Thank you, sir.
Honorable CS.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in response to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished Senator for Meru, I would like to tell the House that the use of force is an immediate, short-term, and painkiller remedy for the problem. And therefore, once we stabilize, we will roll out all the other interventions in terms of socio-economic, infrastructural, and amenity development, peace building as well, and we request the support and cooperation of the elected leaders. And I can report to this House that the ministry has already generated the appropriate framework for the reconstruction of all the affected areas, a Marshall Plan of sorts, as promised by President William Ruto during his campaigns for the presidential election. And that paper is now pending clearance at the National Security Council and the Cabinet. I can assure the nation, through you, Mr. Speaker, that in another 2 months, we will be able to announce the comprehensive Marshall Plan for permanent solutions, so that we don't have these things repeating every year, and for us doing the same thing every other year and expecting different results. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to thank the Minister for coming. I had no doubt, given the frustration we shared with him in this House for many years when we needed information from this critical ministry, that he would come. And I want to thank him and his office for the cooperation that they gave us when we were trying to urge them to come. Mr. Minister, in your position, you have access to special intelligence reports. Kenyans would like to know, unless your disclosure will prejudice operations, they would like you to tell them the role played by political players, including sitting MCAs and sitting members of parliament, who we believe wrongly or otherwise, you'll confirm that they are part of the problem of incitement, the problem of giving logistical support, and the problem of funding, and Mr. Speaker, the problem of procuring markets where these animals are sold as far away from northeastern as Nairobi in Dagoretti. Could you share with us? And number 1B of my question, Mr. Speaker, do you have a plan, Minister, to disband that structure of security called police reservists?
Honorable CS, kindly proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to respond as follows with regard to the supplementary question raised by the distinguished senator for Kakamega. We have made significant progress in tracking and nailing the masterminds of banditry. I can confidently assure the people of Kenya, we have in our radar a number of politicians of different cadres whose activities have been linked to the support, funding, and encouragement of banditry. We have crucial evidence, some of which was collected at the scene of crime at the attack in Kainuk early in the year, which incriminates political leaders and other people. I can also report to the House, we have evidence which we are almost at the tail end of finalizing and processing of the senior commanders in the banditry enterprise. Mr. Speaker, the banditry criminal enterprise has its own command. Just last week, one of the most notorious commanders of banditry was apprehended alive from the Corcoran Hills and arraigned in court. And the leaders from Baringo and those parts know who that person is. He's terrorized us and is even helping us even to zero in and fill the gaps of the investigations that are ongoing. I want to assure the House that very soon we will have high-profile arraignment of the command of bandits, whether they are civilian commanders, politicians, etc. And we want to build a case that will succeed in court. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable CS. Now, Honorable Senators, indeed, I can see quite a number of senators would wish to ask supplementary questions to the Cabinet Secretary. However, we have expended well about 40 minutes on this particular question. If you remember my first communication when we adopted these standing orders, I indeed made it clear to you that we were going to spend at most 20 minutes per question. I want to believe that the CS Interior, this is not his last appearance before us, and any supplementary question, Honorable Senators, you may be having, I believe we'll still find an appropriate opportunity to be answered by the CS. Therefore, I'm afraid to say that we will. Honorable Senators, the reason I always ask you to read your standing orders is because of, for such reasons. You're raising a point of order on who? There's no senator who is on his feet. And therefore, that is the communication from the chair. Now, honorable senators, I've got a communication to make. Senator Kinyua, kindly take your seat. I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Right Honorable Chief Fortune Zephaniah Charumbira, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, in the Speaker's Gallery. The Right Honorable Charumbira is in the country for an official visit to the Parliament of Kenya. He is accompanied by Mr. Daniel Bachwane, an officer from the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Senators, I have had an opportunity to engage with the Right Honorable Chief Charumbira, and our discussion centered on parliamentary diplomacy and climate change. These are pertinent issues affecting African region as a whole, with respect to food security, conflict resolution, and resource management, and are high on the agenda of the Pan-African Parliament. We also had a discussion on the upcoming Heads of State Summit in the month of May 2023 in South Africa. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to the Right Honorable Chief Fortune Zephaniah Charumbira, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish him a fruitful visit. I will call upon the Senator for Tana River, the Honorable Mungatana, to make very brief welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we want to join you as part of the Kenya delegation, which is comprised of myself, the Honorable Professor Kamar, the Honorable Member for the National Assembly, Honorable Mukami, the Honorable Majimbo Kalasinga, the Honorable Esther Passaris, to welcome the President of the Parliament, which is resident in South Africa. Mr. Speaker, this President has been very effective in terms of supporting the agenda for the continent. Mr. Speaker, that Parliament has been transformed from the chaos that it used to be before to a platform for exposition of the agenda of Pan-Africanism. Mr. Speaker, we credit him for the work that he has done since his election as President of the Pan-African Parliament. Mr. Speaker, we from Kenya have been pushing and continue to push that Kiswahili be made a major language at the continental level. Right now, Mr. Speaker, we have Arabic language, we have French, English, and Portuguese. But, Mr. Speaker, the Kiswahili language, although accepted, and it's the only African language, really, indigenous language, has not been used properly and to the large extent that is required in the work of that Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to welcome the Honorable President in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, like you said, we have had great engagements with him. He has been also up to the State House and had great engagements with the President. We are very grateful and honored to have him in Kenya today. Mr. Speaker, I join you in welcoming him. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I will now proceed to discharge the CS Interior. And I've noticed that most of these so-called supplementary questions can actually be posed as substantive questions. So the mere fact that you have not gotten an opportunity to ask your supplementary question, you still have a window to actually pose your supplementary question as a substantive question to the CS, and it still appear here. So, Honorable CS, thanks for coming. You stand discharged for the day. I will proceed to call Senator for Isiolo, the Honorable Fatuma Dulo, to ask. But before you do that, kindly give us a few minutes as we usher in the responsible CS. Yes, what clarification are you seeking, Senator Chirange?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with you that this is the first time that we are doing this. Mr. Speaker, I don't know, maybe through SBC or your office, understanding order number one, Mr. Speaker, you should have at least allowed us to ask. I know that is behind us, but the point I'm trying to make, Speaker, understanding order number one, I wish the Senate Business Committee, especially when the Minister of Interior is appearing, Minister of Finance, Minister of Health, is it possible to schedule them only during one session? For example, like between, we have amended from 9:30 to 12:30, Mr. Speaker, because security is everything. You and me agree. There is a lot that goes on from the village level to the highest level, Mr. Speaker, and I know the next time, even if some of these questions, Mr. Speaker, as you have noted, that it could be substantive, but again, it could be overtaken by events. Like the issue of banditry in the north, like other issues, what is happening in Shakahola, cult, Mr. Speaker, in your county, and many others, Mr. Speaker. So I call upon, in as much as there is standing order number 51(7)C, Mr. Speaker, and I also need your interpretation on this because I have realized my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, just allow me quickly as we allow changeover. Also understanding order 51(C)(7)B. When it says it says upon the issuance of response or making of a statement under paragraph 1, the Speaker may. So you can see, Mr. Speaker, standing order number 1 and 51(7)C is similar. May be, of course, allow the senator who asks the question to raise a maximum of 2 supplementary questions that relate to that question. And B, allow any other senator to ask a supplementary question. Mr. Speaker, on that 51(C)(7)B, you need to give direction so that members cannot use that as a pretext of making a debate, making a speech. And when you say supplementary question, does it mean you can tie up into one question before asking, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, kindly in future, understanding order number 1, you have power, Mr. Speaker, to allow us to ask as many questions as possible, Mr. Speaker. And even the Bible says we were not meant to obey the rules. It is the rules who should obey us, Mr. Speaker. So I beg with your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. And I know as you sit here, Mr. Speaker, sir, you would have also wished that we ask something about Shakahola in your county because you cannot ask. Some of us were willing to do the job for you, the legwork, Mr. Speaker. So kindly be patient with us. Please be fair to us. You are our father. Please sometimes allow us to ask for the benefit of our constituents, Mr. Speaker. With that indulgence, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chirange. Indeed, this is the first session we're having on these newly introduced standing orders. And going forward, of course, we are learning and looking at the weight and the interest that is normally generated whenever the CS Interior appears either before the National Assembly or the Senate. I believe as we sit in SBC, we'll take on board the very valid concerns that you've raised, that maybe whenever the CS Interior is appearing, we do not have any other CSs appearing on that particular day, so that we can give ample time to senators to ask as many supplementary questions as possible. But I believe it's a learning process. Once we retire as SBC, these are the things we're going to put together, looking at the experience we've had today, how do we then get better going forward? And I believe the next session should be much better than the one we are just having. But indeed, it is a valid concern that you've raised, and we're going to take it on board once we retire as SBC. Is the CS Lands present? Senator Fatuma Dulo, kindly proceed to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you. I thank also the CS for lands. Mr. Speaker, let me confirm to this House, this is the second time that I'm actually pursuing this matter. The first time I brought a question to the floor of the House, and NLC completely refused to respond to the issues I have raised. And that is why I'm repeating the question, because my people's rights is being violated. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether you can allow me to ask the question plus supplementary so that I'm done with the question.
Let us abide by our standing orders. Just ask the question.
Okay.
Let the CS
Okay.
respond, and then you shall rise to ask your supplementary question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I beg to ask the Cabinet Secretary for Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. Could the Cabinet Secretary state the reason for the disparity in compensation between residents of Nuno, Madogashi and Isiolo affected by the African Gateway project, and further provide the criteria used in determining the compensation figures? Number two, what are the measures put in place by the government to ensure equitable compensation to the affected residents in both areas? Can I confirm to this House that I have not gone through the response I've just received this morning? I thank you.
Cabinet Secretary, kindly proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to appear before this August House, and also appreciate the question from Honorable Senator Fatuma Dulo. Mr. Speaker, I request for your indulgence and guidance because, as the Honorable Senator said, the mandate of compensation for public lands is squarely on National Lands Commission pursuant to Article 67 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and Section 113 of the Land Act 2012. Mr. Speaker, after receiving this question, I forwarded the matter to the National Lands Commission via a letter dated 20th April 2023, and it's annexed, it's marked as Annexure 2, and I received a report which is attached as Annexure 2. Honorable Speaker, this matter was executed by the National Lands Commission, which is an independent institution. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I was requesting for your guidance as to whether I go ahead and submit the report that I received from the National Lands Commission, because as a government, the report we received, we feel it's not adequately done. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if I'm allowed, I would request that you give guidance to this, whether I go ahead and give and submit the report that I received from the National Lands Commission.
Senator Dulo.
Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank the CS. Mr. Speaker, I'm really heartened because NLC is a government department, is squarely under Ministry of Lands. And as the minister has said, we have even had a city